I am Dr. Mohammad Rafi, Associate Professor, Department of Cybersecurity at Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today I want to discuss about the problem solvings on TCP Echo Client and TCP Echo Server. Topic is TCP Echo Client and TCP Echo Server. Here is TCP Echo Client and the programming. The problem is Echo Client. Echo Client, that means Echo means here whatever the message we have sent from client to the server, same message the server need to send back to client. That is the meaning of the echo. For that now we have to implement the program. Sending same message is a task. Here is a TCP Echo Client programming. It is a one application. It is a TCP Echo is a one application at client side. So these are the TCP Echo, what it is doing, which is sending some message from the client at the device to the server, particular the server. That server is, if it is a echo server, that means is send back the same message, whatever the message is sent, the same message sent to the client, responded to the client, which is in turns, which is sending the same message back to the client. Here, this is a meaning. Here is the illustration of a basic the TCP Echo Client programming by using the Python software, using the socket library. Now, these TCP Echo Client the programming generally, which is consisting of the importing the first, we have to import the necessary modules for implementation of the echo. That means we need to socket module to create the client side as a socket. Here we have to creating the client side as a socket. Why? Because it is a TCP Echo Client programming. That's why at a client side now we have to create the sockets. So here is the purpose of the socket, which is sending the messages, or receiving the messages, or receiving the messages. So this is the purpose of the socket. Further now, what we are doing, we have to create one socket at a client side. Here is for that now we have to create a one socket object at client side. So these are the socket object now, which can perform the operations receiving and sending the messages with help of the socket function. Here in this the implementation, in this the problem in the implementation now we have to creating the one socket as the object, and the socket with help of this the socket the functions, so that can be the create. From the socket as the module creates a new socket. We are creating the new socket at client side. So that socket is a echo socket. So these are the socket now, which is specify the address of the family. AF address family, that means here it is the address family is a AF INET family. AF INET address of the family. Now we have to specify the this address of the family and the socket of the type. Socket type. So that means connected to the server. Connected to the server. Next, after creating the socket at a client side, which is connecting to the server. So for that now we are uses the connect method. By using the connect the method socket dot the connect method, here is we are use the socket dot connect method. Socket dot the connect method. By using this the method now, we can connect the socket to the server. That means once the connection is establishment to the server, now we can start sending the data through the socket. Here for sending data, now we have to use the send all method or send to method. By using the send all or send to method, here is in the TCP we are using the send all. These other methods can be utilized in a TCP, but in a UDP we can utilize the just send to. So these are the send to method can be used to sending the data to the server. Here is receive data. Receive data means here now by using the receive method to receiving the data from the server. Receiving the data from the other server. Here is close the socket. So these are the close the socket now, which is uses the close method. When we are closing the socket here, once the communication is completed, once the message the transparency is completed, then we can close the socket. Here is for that now we are using the close method to closing the other socket. That means once if it is a close here, so which stops the sending and receiving other messages. Here is some simple the TCP echo client program which was implemented by using the Python the programming language. That is now importing the first we have to importing the socket. After establishing the other connection, now we have to import the other socket. So this socket now, this importing the socket, we have to import the socket. That means now for that now what we are doing, the TCP echo client now we are creating at the host side. At the host side using the port number. Here is the step 2 what we are doing, create a socket objects. How we are creating the socket objects by using the create the method. That now socket the method is now we are using the address family inet and socket streaming af.inet and socket.streaming. So by using these the arguments now we can creating the socket objects. So these two are the common. Once if the socket object is created now, which will be working, receiving the other messages or sending the other messages over the internet. So that is the method is client socket, which is equals to socket.socket, socket.af.inet and socket and streaming. Now which is flowing the other messages. Try. So try means here now step 3. So which is the connect to the server. Connecting to the other server. So how we are going to connecting to the server? Once the socket is created, now we have to connect the server. Here for that now we are using the method socket connect method. If the socket is connected at client side, now can use client socket connect. Here host and port number. So this host and port number. So these are the host now which is consisting of the IP address. Which is consisting of the IP address. So for example, IP address is a 192.168.162.162.0. So this is the IP address and which is having the each and every host having the one port number. That port number is a 1224. For example, this is the other port number. Now once the socket the socket is connected to the server. Now With help of these IP address and the port number, now which is other connected. So which is connected means here, which is the binding, which is binding the socket to the server. Once if it is connected to host on a particular port number, here is a 1024 is the port number. On this the particular port number now, which will be connected. Once successfully the connection is established, now we can sending the data. Step 4 here, sending the data. So what data we are sending here? Here the object is a message, hello echo server. So these are the messages now we are going to sending. Print, send the message. Once printing the other message now, send to all message encoding. So UTF-O dot. That means here the message, whatever the message now we are sending from the client to other server, which is converted into the unknown other form. So that is that the source of the code can be converted into the cipher text. So that is for that now what we are doing, we are utilizing the encryption technology at the server side now. So we can again decrypt the whatever the message is the encrypted, that encrypted message can be decrypted at the server side. So that means encryption and decryption, now we can securely sending the other data from client to server. Here is the server. Once the data is sent by the server, now once the data which is sent by the server, sent by the client, here what it is doing in a step 5, the server is now which is receiving the data, whatever the data have sent by the client, that the sent the data received by the server. Here is for that now what we are doing, data client socket dot receive, that is a 1024. With help of this the port number it can be received, and a print received data dot the decode. Here with help of that one now it can be received. This is by using this receive method. So our receive from method, now we can receive the data. Generally in a TCP echo client echo server now, for receiving we are using the RECV, receive. But in a UDP echo server client now, so we'll use receive from the method we can use. In a UDP now we can use the receive from method. Receive from method, now we can use the receive from method. By using the receive from method, now we can receive the data. Once the data is received, finally what we'll do in a TCP echo client, so closing the socket, whatever the socket now we have created at the client side, now that can be close the socket. So that is client socket dot close. Print connection is a closed. Print connection is closed if name is equals to main. So that is the host number, that is the IP address 127.0.0.1 is a local host to IP address, and the port number 65432 is the port number. So these are the port now which is to connecting, that make sure the echo server is running on this the port. So this is the port number. TCP echo client. So that means now host and the port number, which binds the host, the IP address and port number. So with that, by identifying this host and port number now, easily we can sending the data. Here is the explanation now. If you see the code, whatever the code now we have explained, this is the explanation. Importing means now what it is doing, the socket module which provide the access to the BSD socket interface, and create the socket objects. Creating the socket object means now before sending the data to the server, first we have to create the socket object. After creating the socket object, now we can send the data in a TCP echo server. But in a UDP echo server now, if you take the UDP echo server, in UDP echo server, so no need to create the socket before sending the data. Before the connecting, now we can send the data in a UDP echo client and UDP echo server. But in a TCP here, we have before sending the data, first we have to creating the socket and establish the connectivity from client to server. That is a socket.af inet, which specifies the address family for IPv4, and socket socket streaming, which specifies the socket type for TCP, transmission control protocol. Connect to the server. Connect to the server. So step 2, after this socket creation, what we are doing now, we are connecting to the server. Then only we can send the data. How we are going to connecting the server? With help of the host and port number, with help of the combination of the IP address and port number. Now here host and port number means now we are binding the IP address and port number of the particular other device, and that can be connected to the server. Whatever the server now we have taken, that will be connected to particular other server. So after connecting to the server, what we are doing now, send the data. Send the data. Here is send all. Send all now here, which is sends the all messages to the server. All other messages, whatever the messages now you want to sending here. So all the messages can be sent after once the connection is established. So for that, while sending the data or the messages to the server, what we are doing now, encode are the method we are utilizing. So encoding data or message, simply we can call it as a encryption, which is converting the strings to byte. Strings to byte. Why we are converting the strings to byte means here the mission, whatever the data we are converting here, the mission which only understand the binary informations. So that's why now we are utilizing the these convert the string to byte. And receive data. Here is receive data. Receive data means now which receives up to the 1024 bytes. Which receives up to the 1024 bytes from the server. Here is the decode. The decode of the method now, which is the converts byte back to the string. Here, whatever the byte backs now to a string, it is nothing but a decoding technique. With the encoding, we are sending the data, and with the help of this the decoding, we can receive the other data. Here, after sending and receiving is completed, now we can terminate the other connection. We can close the other connections. That is a close other socket. Running the program. Running the other program means here, which ensures that an echo server is running on the specified host and port. So which is running on the specified host and port. Run the TCP echo client other programming. Here, when you are running the client programming with help of the TCP echo the socket, so it will be connected to the echo server and sending the message, that is a hello echo server. So receives the echoed message from the server, print the received messages and then close the connection. Once the communication is completed, now we can close the other connection. Yes, next the question is the problem is how to demonstrate a C program on TCP echo server. Here is any other programming language. Once the algorithm is implemented of particular server and client, so which is independent of the implementation, programming language implementations. That algorithm now we may implement in a C language or we may implement in a Python programming language. Below is the simple TCP echo server programming in a C. Here is these are the service listen from the incoming connections from the client. After listening that the service now which is receiving the messages from the clients and sends the same other message, same message back to the client. So this is the meaning of the TCP echo server. So TCP echo server, the programming in C here. First, what we are doing now, any other programming, C programming or C++ programming, any programming in Java programming, the implementation, first, so we have to include the header files will be considered. While writing any programming language, we have to consider the header files. Why? Because here, with help of these header files here, all the data can be stored in a header file library. We need to include the standard input, output and socket libraries. Standard input, output and socket other libraries can be included. And define the constants. That means here now we can define the constants for the buffer size. Depends upon the buffer size and the port or the number. Now can define the constants. Creating the socket. Here, once if you want to sending the data, first you have to creating the socket. Now new socket can be created at the client side. Similarly, at the server side also we can create the sockets. Once if you create the socket, then only the connection will be establishment. Without creating the socket, we can't establish the connection. Why? Because here, with help of this the sockets only now, we can send the data or we can receive the data. That's why first we have to, before sending the data, before the connection establishment, first we have to creating the sockets at both server side and client side. That is here, and binding the socket. Why? Here now, while binding the socket now, how can you bind the socket? Generally, with help of the host IP address and port number, now we can bind the socket. Once if it is bind the socket, immediately which listen the incoming connections or incoming messages from the other client. Here, which is listening the functions from the incoming other connections from the other client. So that is a listen for other connection. Accept the other connection. So once if it is accept the other connection here, then only we can able to sending the data from the host and we can able to receive the data from the server. The echo message. Echo message here. Echo message means here use the receive send other functions to receiving the other message from the clients and sending the same message back. Here is closing the connections. Closing the connections means here by using the close function. Now to close the sockets. So this is about the close the other connections. When we are closing the connections, generally once the communication is successful, communication is successfully completed between the client and server, then we can close the connections. Here is this is a TCP echo server implementation by using the C programming language. First now we have to include the header files. So by using the header files now, the standard input or standard libraries, the string and INISTD and any alphabetics, any INET, the information can be stored in this other header files. That is a special operator. With help of this the linking now we can store the whatever the information now we are writing, whatever the code we are writing, so that can be stored. Here is a define port 65432, define buffer size 1024, int main, int server FD, client FD. Here is now this is the initialization. We are initializing the server file descriptor and the client file descriptors. Now we are initializing, declaring that file descriptors. Struck socket address in the server and address client address. That means here char buffer the size. That means here and we are declaring the socket length, server socket length, client socket length and the address of the length. So the size of the client address can be assigned. Here creating a socket. How we are going to creating a socket? Now the condition is if server file descriptor is equals to socket address, if it is a AF address family INET, so it is a mandatory for creating the address. So any socket now with these objects are very mandatory. AF INET and these are the common. It won't change in any programming language. You may use the Java or you may implement in a C language or implement in a Python programming language. So any or in a Linux using this C hash, So these two are the for creating this is the standard of the method. This won't change and 0 is the argument. These three arguments are the standardized. Initially there is 0 means here initially there is no socket creation, which indicates after creating the other sockets now, so it will be the establish the other communications generally. Here is error. If there is no other connection now, socket will be failed. There is no socket. Exit the socket as a failure. Initially, if there is no socket creation, without the socket creation now, if you send the information from client to the server here, so the failure, the transparency, the message, the transparency will be fail. Step the 4 here. Step 4, binding the socket to the specified other port. That means server address SIN as a family, that is AF INET. AF INET and server address SIN address, that means INADDR underscore anyway ANY. Server ADDR server address dot SINET socket INET. In INET now simply we can say it as a SIN port. Here H2N the port. If bind, we are binding based on the server socket address. Server the socket address and the port number. Now we are going to binding. Both server address and the port number is required for that the binding. Size of the, now if the size of the address, server client socket address or server socket address, if it is less than 0, this is a condition. Now bind will be failed, error will be arised. Closing the server file the descriptor, the transparency can be closed and exit the failure. Otherwise now, if it is greater than the 0, that means now it is binding the address, IP address and port number and sending the information. If it is greater than 0, suppose here listening for incoming connection, that means server FD comma 3, so is less than 0. If it is a true, listen will be failed. Closing the server connection and exit the fail. So suppose here if it is a false, that means server FD 3 is a greater than 0. Now listen the connection, listen the messages, accept the messages and receiving the messages from the other client, and communication can be established. So that means now else part, if it is true, this block will be executed. If it is a false, now the controller will come to here and printing the messages. Echo server is listening on port, listening, connecting, accepting, receiving the message with help of the port number, accepting incoming connections in an infinite loop. Here is while, if it is while 1, if the client FD is accepted, so server FD structure socket address, which is the pointing type, the client address and the client address length, if it is less than or equals to 0, P error accept the fail, close server the FD, exit the failure, print accepted the connection from, here is if it is a print, accept the connection from the client, int N2A client address SIN address, N2H client address SIN the port number. Here is by utilizing this one here, now by using these all these other code, now we can accept the incoming other connections in an infinite other loop and printing the accepted other connections. Echo step 7 in what we are doing, echo, that is the same, sending back the same echo received message back to the other client into bytes. So when we are echoing the received messages, when you are sending back the received messages, the condition for that one is, this is the condition. The condition for echoing message, return back in the same message, byte underscore read, that is equals to receive client FD buffer size comma 0. If it is greater than or equals to 0, we are echoing the other messages. Send client FD buffer byte read 0. Step 8, closing the connections. And close client FD. Print the connection will be closed. Close server FD and returning. Explanation for that one here, which includes the necessary headers for the input output sockets, the programming, and define the constants, and creating the sockets, binding the sockets here. So these are the steps now will follow. Listening for the connection. After that, after listening here, accept the connections and receiving the messages, successfully completed the communication, closing the connections. So for this running the program, now we can use the compiler as the GCC -o TCP echo server.c. By using these the compilation server.c, the compilation, now we can compile the program and run the server. Run the server here. For that is the command is /TCP echo server. By using this TCP echo server the file name, now we can run the file. So the server will starting the listening on the specified the port. We can use the TCP client that can be implemented using the Python programming language connected to the particular the server and test the echo the functionality. This is about the TCP echo client and TCP echo server. So like this, now we can solving the problems by implementing the programs at client side and server side. We can solve the programs. Unix text the references for this one is Unix network programming. For this topic, reference book the socket networking API volume 1 by Richard Steven, and web references. So this is a web reference for this TCP echo client and TCP echo server. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.